House of the Dragon has returned. It's always such a good time when I get to return to the world of Westeros, when I get to return to the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. Game of Thrones is by far my favorite TV show of all time, and House of the Dragon is quickly becoming my second favorite show, if it's not already. And of course, the books are my favorite books in existence, and my love for this universe, for House Targaryen, is literally etched into my skin. So of course I was excited for season 2 to premiere, and it just premiered last night, and then I watched it, and then I watched it again this morning, and I have a lot of thoughts that I want to share with you guys. So I'm going to get into the review, but before I do that, just know that this video is going to contain spoilers. It's not going to be a play-by-play though. I'm not going to talk about every single thing that happened, but I will talk about main plot points. So just be warned, spoiler warning here. But also, before we get into the review, consider subscribing. I talk about TV shows all the time on this page. I talk about movies and video games. Or just consider subscribing if you want to support a fellow fanatic of this amazing Game of Thrones universe. So this episode begins with our first look in this series of The Wall, and I just love that we got to return to The Wall. In the main show, everything that happened at The Wall or north of The Wall, all those plot lines, all those characters, all those moments, all those just iconic stare downs between Jon Snow and the Night King were my favorite aspect of the original show, so I just love that we got to return there. And it was really cool seeing a Stark and a Targaryen on the wall together, conversing, having a conversation amongst themselves. It's small in the relative scheme of this narrative, of this plot of this universe, but we know the implications of that sort of relationship going forward in this universe, so I loved seeing it. And I didn't dislike Jace in season 1. I really liked Jace in season 1, but already in this season, his character has become a lot more likable. The writing around him has become a lot more interesting. But my favorite part of this episode, especially when it comes to the emotional aspects of this episode, was everything that had to do with Rhaenyra, because she spends the vast majority of this episode alone with her dragon, looking for the son of her body, Luke, because she needs that closure. And it was just so sad. It was so depressing to see, and the performance was just absolutely phenomenal, even though Rhaenyra has, I think, one line of dialogue when she says she wants Aemon Targaryen dead. But probably the most heartbreaking moment of this episode, and probably one of the most heartbreaking moments of this show so far, was when Rhaenyra returns to Dragonstone, and Jace also returns to Dragonstone, and he's delivering, good news. He was able to unite with the Eyrie, he was able to unite with the Starks, and as he's, trying to get that information across to Rhaenyra, they both just start breaking down, crying, because she lost her son, he lost his brother, and it was just, again, it was heartbreaking. It really, really was. And now I want to go back to when Rhaenyra said she wants Aemon's head. It filled me full of adrenaline. I was so excited to see this sequence play out, especially since Daemon took it upon himself to try and carry out this assassination attempt. Actually, let me correct myself. Daemon did not take it upon himself. He did, however, take it upon himself to go to King's Landing and hire Dumb and Dumber to try and carry out this assassination attempt, which just blew my mind, because Daemon is not the smartest dude in the realm, obviously, but he is one of the smartest dudes in the realm, especially in its current timeline. It just blows my mind that he didn't think of or have a more sufficient way to try and carry out this assassination. But that whole sequence of these two guys going through the Red Keep just had me on the edge of my seat, because any other episode of this show or any other episode of another TV show or another movie would have had this sequence be a lot quicker. It probably would have had Daemon paying them, telling them the plan, and then maybe one or two quick shots of them making their way through the Red Keep until they got to the point where they either succeeded or they failed in their mission. But in this episode, it was like 10 minutes of us following them every step of the way, and it was just it had me biting my nails, because it had me wondering, why are we seeing every step of what they're doing? When are they going to fuck up? And the way this sequence ended was just absolutely horrifying. And they end up making their way to the room where Helaena is with her two twins, and they end up chopping the head off of the heir, the young heir, not Aemond. And it was just brutal. It was heartbreaking. It was so just ugh. But what this episode does the best is that it actually kind of evens the playing field, in my opinion, in terms of sympathy points between Team Green and Team Black, because I just rewatched season 1 of House of the Dragon, and when I finished my rewatch, I was Team Black all the way. I was 99.9% Team Black, and don't get me wrong, I am still absolutely Team Black at this point in the story. But after this episode, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm sympathizing with Team Green a lot more, to the point where it might actually be like 80% Team Black, 20% Team Green now. Maybe even 70-30. Because they just had their young heir, who's no more than a toddler, murdered. Of course they're going to want blood for that. Of course they're going to want revenge for that. And you can't even blame them. But another thing that this episode does so phenomenally well is that it actually makes Aegon the king likable. It actually makes him out to be kind of a relatively decent dude, and more importantly, a decent king, which I did not think was going to be the case, especially knowing all of the just fucked up shit he did in season 1. But he seems to be a father that is actually involved with his son, who seems to love his son, who actually cares about being a dad. He actually treats his queen kinda decently. There's a scene in this episode where he's hearing pleas from common folk, and he's trying to be fair. He's trying to be nice. He's trying to do everything he can to just make the common folk feel, like they're actually being listened to, and Otto's telling him not to do it. And it was just so weird to see. I was not expecting that. And I knew that this character was just going to have a phenomenal character arc after episode 9 of last season, where he went through such a drastic, amazing character change with no line of dialogue at all. When he's walking through the crowd of people to be crowned king, and you just can tell by his body language that he does not want this. This is basically a prison sentence for him. But then that crown gets placed on his head, and he raises that sword, and the people are cheering for him, and you can just see a huge shift in his character. However, my favorite character in the show so far, based on season 1 and episode 1 of season 2, is still Daemon, mainly because Daemon is such a wild card. He's arguably, if not definitely, the most unpredictable character in the franchise so far. At least for me, because you can never tell exactly where his head is. You can never tell exactly what his motivations are. Like, is he trying to manipulate people? Is he trying to get power for himself? Or is he just trying to do right by Rhaenyra, by his family, by those that care about him, by those that he cares about? He just goes about it in bad ways. Because he hears that Rhaenyra wants Aemon dead, and he tries to do everything he can to win her war. He still says that Rhaenyra is queen. He still wants everybody to bend the knee to Rhaenyra and acknowledge her. But then he goes out of his way to kind of undermine her and do stuff his own way. It's just, he's such a complicated character, and I love it. One thing I did notice that was different between the first episode of this season and all of season 1 is that it seems that the tone kind of shifted kind of drastically. Everything is still technically great, don't get me wrong. The direction was great. The sound design in this episode was mind-blowing. But season 1 had a tone of a lot of sadness and darkness and a lot of melancholy, and it was very kind of somber. But the first episode of this season felt, and I don't want this to sound like a negative, it felt a lot more blockbustery. It felt a lot more kind of fun and punchy in terms of the lighting, the direction, the overall atmosphere and tone. But anyway, that's my quick and brief thoughts of House of the Dragon season 2. Episode 1. What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments, because I really want to discuss this episode with some people, but do not spoil anything that happens in the future. Once again, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.